Part 135. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1341. You guys who collect smoke to disperse your souls, what's the big deal? Yuan Kong disagrees. Immortal people live for a long time. If their talents are limited and they cannot understand the techniques that match their immortal roots, then in order to survive, they can only make a living by collecting smoke soul powder. Or just leave town to find animal bones. The harvest of animal bones is huge, but the risks are also huge. As for Yan Hun-san, it is relatively easy, but it is more likely that you will take it for a lifetime. My lord, please come to the room to speak, Master Zhu Xianxi. Since Sun Tianming has spoken, it means that he has made a decision in his heart. Yuan Kong didn't take it seriously, and followed Sun Tianming into the house with Zhu Yun. The outside of the house looks dilapidated, but the inside is somewhat tidy, which shows that Sun Tianming is also a fastidious person. Generally speaking, this kind of person. I'm afraid I also have lofty ambitions in my heart. Maybe he also wants to continue to understand the immortal root technique. Zhu Yun thought for a moment and then asked, Sun Tianming, what kind of immortal root are you? This was the first time Zhu Yun spoke. Sun Tianming was startled and whispered, return to immortal Zhu, I don't even know what kind of immortal root it is. Seeing that Zhu Yun didn't say anything, Sun Tianming proved his innocence and said, why don't Zhu Xianxi and Yuan Xianguan help the villain take a look? After saying that, he stamped his feet suddenly, shouted lowly, and his face quickly turned red. After a moment, a dark yellow light and shadow appeared between his eyebrows. This means that he has not yet found a way to use the immortal power, so naturally he cannot embark on the path of cultivating immortality. However, the ability to condense immortal roots has surpassed more than 90% of the immortal citizens in the town. Moreover, the shape of this immortal root can also be roughly seen. Yuan Kong shook his head and said that he didn't recognize it, but Zhu Yun frowned. This immortal root has no fixed shape and looks more like the shadow immortal root of Zhou Pao before he broke through. Well, is it also a special immortal root? Zhu Yun couldn't help but have this idea in his mind. You must know that whether it is the Zhou immortal root of Dian Immortal King or the Dragon immortal root of Dian Immortal King, they have a fixed shape. There is also Zhou Gun Stick immortal root. After his breakthrough, he evolved into the Gun immortal root. It is a condensed immortal root, and its shape is fixed. What he has seen so far is that only Zhou Pao's shadow immortal root and yin immortal root will continue to flow when condensed. Is it possible that Sun Tianming also has shadow immortal roots? But obviously, it's not. According to his current understanding of immortal roots, even if the immortals are not able to control the immortal roots, they will still bring corresponding innate talents to the immortals. Zhou Pang had told him this. He was discovered by Derong Immortal King precisely because one day, Derong Immortal King was traveling and did not find Zhou Pao standing under the shade of a tree. It wasn't until he got closer that he suddenly saw a person. Who is the great Immortal King? The Immortal King, who had lived for tens of thousands of years and was well informed, immediately guessed that Zhou Pao had special immortal roots, so he took him in, confirmed that his immortal roots were shadow immortal roots, and then raised him. He was made into a dedicated errand runner. Also because he has yin immortal roots, Zhou Pao will not be completely trusted. This is also the reason why Zhou Baohui recognizes Zhu Yun so much. Speaking of which, this Sun Tianming. Is it also a special fairy root? For example, poison immortal root? Zhu Yun couldn't help but think otherwise. When he mentioned the poison spirit bead, he showed various suspicious appearances, combined with the invisible shape of the immortal root, it was very likely that it was the poison immortal root. Because many of the best poisons are colorless, odorless, and invisible. It just fits his immortal roots. Sir, Zhu Xianxi, can you tell what kind of immortal root this villain is? Sun Tianming could only hold on for a few breaths, and the immortal roots quickly faded away. He was panting heavily, his face still very red. The time is too short to feel the pseudo-immortal power between heaven and earth, and naturally it is impossible to comprehend through the pseudo-immortal power. Yuan Kong shook his head, but Zhu Yun said meaningfully, your immortal roots must be related to that bead, right? As soon as these words came out, Sun Tianming's expression suddenly changed, and his words became stuttering, bless, wish to the immortal, what do you mean by this? Zhu Yun smiled slightly, looked at Yuan Kong, and said, official Yuan Xian, I'll have a few words with the Sun Tianming, and I'd like you to step aside, how about that? Yuan Kong also smiled and said, I wish the immortal to do his own thing, I'll go guard outside the house. Thank you. Zhu Yun cupped his hands and Yuan Kong left immediately. Then, Zhu Yun waved his hands in formation, arranged a soundproof ban, and said, okay, Sun Tianming, no one will hear what you say next except you and me. Tell me, do you know what it is? Immortal root. Sun Tianming was shocked by Zhu Yun's methods. He could clearly see outside the house, and he could even see Yuan Kong's shadow walking back and forth about Sun. Zhu Yun's reputation for his magical power has already spread throughout Duxian town. He gritted his teeth and said truthfully, returning to Immortal Zhu, I really don't know what the immortal root is, but my ancestors have always taught me that you must not explore your own immortal roots before you can cultivate your pseudo-immortal power. Then what's going on with this bead? Zhu Yun pursed his lips toward the outside, having just forgotten to take back the poison spirit pearl with Yuan Kong. These green spirit beads were passed down from the ancestors of the little people. The ancestors left more than 10 of them. We need to keep them with us from time to time. They say they have a chance to stimulate the immortal roots. Zhu Yun thought for a while and said, so, your immortal roots can also be passed down, unlike other immortals whose immortal roots are not fixed. Yes, so this is what the villain said. It is of great importance. I heard my father say that we originally lived in a place called Qingping Star. Later, a piece of Qingping Star split off, and we are now Qingping Star. Pingxian Kingdom. But on Qingping Star, only the blood of powerful families can pass down the immortal roots so that the immortal roots of future generations will be the same. Zhu Yun nodded, this is also the same reason. Just like a sect in the spiritual world, they practice the same skills and pass them down from generation to generation. The cultivation of immortal roots is too difficult, and you need to rely on your own insights. However, if you have the same immortal roots, you can pass your understanding to the next generation. As long as your luck is not too bad, you will naturally become stronger and stronger after countless years of accumulation. Because of the lessons learned from the past, it will be easier to practice. And obviously, this Sun family. It seems to be a declining family, so much so that they didn't even tell them about their immortal roots. Since it belongs to your ancestors, logically speaking, I shouldn't want it, Zhu Yun smiled and said, however, this bead is indeed useful to me. Why don't we make a deal? What do you think? Sun Tianming gritted his teeth and said, Zhu Xianxia, you are kind to the villain. Yuan Xianguan is right. If it weren't for you, my Sun family lineage would have been discontinued. It stands to reason that these spiritual beads, it doesn't matter if I give them all to you. But after all, the villain survived. If you exchange it for other spirit beads, the villain. Zhu Yun laughed dumbly and said, Sun Tianming, don't be nervous. I guessed that you are He Xianjin, and I told you, you try in this direction. And as long as you have 3 spirit beads, you can how? Sun Tianming was shocked and couldn't stand the passage, Zhu Xianxia, do you know my immortal roots? That's natural, Zhu Yun said with a confident smile on his face, just say, do you want to trade? If you think this trading method is not feasible, I can also make another trade with you. But that if anything, I want all your spirit beads. There are two choices, one is 3 spirit beads, and the other is all spirit beads. This made Sun Tianming a little confused. If I didn't even agree to the first condition, how could I agree to the second one? Zhu Xianxia is a bit too confident. But if you know what the immortal root is, it will indeed be of great help to Sun Tianming's cultivation, and he will be able to do less useless work in the future. The immortals have long lifespans, but they are short of time. Sun Tianming was silent for a moment and said, Zhu Xianxia, why don't you tell me the terms of the 2 transactions? Okay, Zhu Yun chuckled, you also know the first deal, let me talk about the second one. The second condition is that I will try my best to help you practice, and I will take you to a place where there will be no any dangerous place. But you will also pay a certain price. Before you ascend, you may not be able to come back for the rest of your life. The second condition surprised Sun Tianming again, but his next choice also surprised Zhu Yun. Since Immortal Zhu dares to promise, then I, Sun Tianming, will take the gamble. I choose the second option. After saying that, he had already taken out a bag from his arms and handed it to Zhu Yun. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1342. Zhu Yun opened the bag, and a stream of pure spiritual power emerged from the bag. Poisonous spiritual power. This feeling was exactly the same as the aura given to him by Xiao Lu. There are more than 10 pieces in the bag, and each one is exactly the same as the one in Yuan Kong's hand. Very good, Zhu Yun said lightly with a smile on his face, since you are like this, I will take you to a good place. After that, he threw a few spirit stones casually, set up the 9 revolutions and 9 yang formation, and then brought Sun Tianming into the world of the universe. Here it is. Sun Tianming was just an ordinary immortal. He didn't even have the cultivation method to activate his spiritual roots. How had he ever seen such a mysterious method? Not to mention it was him, he had never seen even the immortal king here or the immortal emperor whose path reaches the sky. This is a portable world. This is an indescribably wonderful place. I can help you practice and find a way to reach the sky. Zhu Yun said with great confidence, come with me. Sun Tianming was a little nervous. He could feel the difference in the atmosphere here. Although the sky and the earth here were darker and there was no sun and moon above his head, the starlight from the stars in the sky gave him a sense of security. Zhu Xianxia, who has such magical powers, wouldn't harm me if he thought about it, right? Sun Tianming also thought wisely. Anyway, if he stayed in Qingping Fairy Kingdom, he would die sooner or later, which would break the inheritance of their Sun family. If you follow Zhu Yun here, you still have a chance to practice. Now that it's here, let's make peace with it. Sun Tianming was no longer afraid and followed Zhu Yun, constantly looking at the surrounding situation. In the distance, there is a large mountain, and at the top of the mountain, there is a huge towering ancient tree. He had a feeling that the tree was staring at him. After walking to the foot of the mountain, Sun Tianming saw the sea of the world and the isolated islands in the sea. At the same time, he also saw an immortal official coming with a golden light. Owner. Zhou Guan landed and glanced at Sun Tianming. He recognized that this was an immortal citizen and felt a little strange. Zhu Yun smiled lightly and said, his name is Sun Tianming, and he will stay in this world for the time being. I will arrange for someone to let him practice at that time. Zhou Gun nodded and greeted Sun Tianming at the same time, my name is Zhou Gun. Weak. Sun Tianming's expression changed, Zhou was the surname of King Derong. Zhu Xianxia even has people from the royal city? He was frightened, but Sun Tianming also came to his senses. Since Zhu Xianxia could bring the people from Wangcheng to this world, then he thought, there will be no danger. Okay, Zhu Yun said with a smile, as for how to arrange your cultivation, I will let someone guide you when the time comes. I have important things to do, so I will come back later. Sun Tianming did not dare to have other ideas, but when he saw Zhu Yun about to leave, he quickly asked, Xianxia, you haven't said yet, what kind of immortal root am I? You, Zhu Yun slapped his forehead, turned around and said with a smile, you are the poison immortal root. Poison immortal root? Sun Tianming was stunned. Zhu Yun had disappeared. He looked at Zhou Gun and found that Zhou Gun's eyes were also a little strange. Are you poison immortal root? As a confidant of immortal King Derong, Zhou Gun knew a lot. Poison immortal root sounded like a special immortal root, and he had never seen it before. Wish Immortal Zhu said this, I actually don't know it myself. Sun Tianming shook his head and looked at Zhou Gun, as if he wanted to find the answer he wanted from him. Don't look at me either, Zhou Gun said with a smile, Master keeps his promise. Since he promised you something, just wait and see. He has great magical powers. If you follow him, you can be said to be the best one you can do choose. By the way, you are still just a fairy, right? Then just walk around here by yourself. Remember, don't leave the range of the mountain. Also, don't collide with any living creatures here. You have no way to protect yourself. It's not a good thing if you get killed. Yes, yes, the villain knows. Zhou Tianming quickly made it clear, while Zhou Gun nodded, then flew up and landed under the world tree again. Now he is just waiting for Zhu Yun's summons and then has a big fight with Derong Immortal King. The newly refined pseudo-immortal weapon in my hand is already thirsty. Zhu Xianxia, are you okay? When Yuan Kong saw Zhu Yun walking out of the house with a small bag in his hand, he couldn't help but smile and handed over the poison spirit bead in his hand. Well, that's enough, let's go back. Good. The two returned to the town mansion again. Luo Xiaoyu and Shan Hao had also returned, and they also had bags in their hands. Here, there are more than 100 beads here, take a look. Zhu Yun's spiritual consciousness swept through and confirmed that these were fire spirit beads, and there were even quite a few of them. They were already full of spiritual power, and there was no need for him to inject any more spiritual power into them. The spiritual power of Qingping Immortal Kingdom is very abundant. It seems that the fire spirit bead absorbed it on its own after some time, which saved him a lot of trouble. Then, all you have to do is wait until dawn. Zhu Yun said goodbye to a few people and went to Wan Potion's house again. Ready. Wan Potion was sitting cross-legged on the bed, concentrating, and opened his eyes when he heard footsteps. It's almost done, Zhu Yun said. In half an hour, it will be daybreak and we should set off. Wan Potion stood up, put on his shoes, and said, what about your helper? Zhou run. Zhu Yun shouted, and a figure appeared. But what made him a little helpless was that Zhou Pao was asleep. In the world of the universe, he could not pinpoint Zhou Pao's position, but outside the world of the universe, he could directly call it out no matter where he was in the world of the universe with just a thought. Zhu Yun stepped forward and kicked him, and Zhou Pao suddenly sat up from the ground. He was shocked when he saw that he was somewhere else. When he found out it was Zhu Yun, he quickly put on a smile and said, Master, I exhausted all the power in my body and then fell asleep. You are really thoughtful, Zhu Yun shouted coldly and said with a straight face, did I tell you that you may come out to help at any time? Zhou Pao scratched his head and said, Master, I know, that's why I wanted to get familiar with the Yin Immortal root as soon as possible. Who knew that the pseudo-immortal power in my body was gone, and then I became a little drowsy, and I don't know why I fell asleep. No need to explain, Zhu Yun looked out the window, the sky was already dimly lit, and he said, take Mayor Wan and go to ambush outside the royal city first. In the Qingping Immortal Kingdom, the pseudo-immortal power was inexhaustible, and it was just hidden in person. Zhou Pao could even restore the pseudo-immortal power while taking action. Wan Potion said in surprise, you won't go with me. Zuyun smiled and said, if I go together, how can I attract the immortal king's attention? That's true. Wan Potion's expression became a little serious as he said, as far as I know, immortal King Durong may still have some tricks up his sleeve, so you must be careful. Zuyun looked at Zhou Pang. Zhou Pao shook his head and said that he didn't know what the immortal King Durong was doing. At the same time, he also said, maybe Elder Gun doesn't know either. It's okay, the soldiers will block it, the water will flood the soil. No big deal, just run away if you can't defeat it. The most important thing is you, try to kill with one hit. Only then did Zhou Pao realize that he was taking Wan Potion to kill people. He himself didn't have much fighting power. Even if he broke through to the high-grade Yin immortal route, he still didn't understand any fighting method. He immediately looked at Wan Potion and felt a little unsure. Zuyun saw what he was thinking and said with a smile, you can run, so what are you afraid of? The main attack is still on Old Man Wan, and the person you are dealing with is a foreigner from the immortal world. There is no difference in the immortal roots. Zhou Pao breathed a sigh of relief and said, Master, Mayor Wan and I will go first. Go ahead, I'll be out later. Wan Potion's expression also became a little solemn, and he made a sword repair gesture to Zuyunxing, take care. Take care of yourself. Zuyun clasped his fists and watched with his own eyes as the immortal root of Zhou Pao encircled Wan Potion and disappeared. Then he stretched out his finger as a pen and drew two spiritual talismans. Invisibility Talisman, Breath-Containing Talisman. Then, he took the Eternal Life technique and ran towards the king of Darong City. Half an hour later, the sun rose in the east, and the golden sunlight shot down thousands of golden lights through the green trees in the sky. In the city of Darong King, Lin Yu took off into the air holding a wishful-looking pseudo-immortal weapon, while Darong Immortal King also followed far behind on an immortal boat. He stood on the keel of the ferry boat and kept turning his head to look around. He had no idea that flying so high, this golden light had already given Zuyun precise position guidance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzwan Xianxia. Chapter 1343. Zuyun ran to the bottom of the flying boat and stopped. He had no way to take off without spiritual power, so he could only choose to stand still and wait for the right time to make a move. In the distance, Lin Yu had already flown into the sky and hid under Qing Ping's shadow, then stretched out his hand and exposed Ruyi's head under the yang fire. The golden light was particularly dazzling, and it was obvious that this pseudo-immortal weapon was absorbing the yang fire. Is it so easy? Zuyun muttered in his mouth, not sure whether the yang fire could be used directly. But he quickly retracted his gaze. Zhou Pao and Wan Potion must have been hiding somewhere, waiting for him to attract the immortal King Darong away before they would take action. After thinking for a moment, Zuyun thought of all the means and decided to use the spiritual talisman to lead the immortal King Darong away from here first. Then, the heavenly talisman is undoubtedly the best choice. Zuyun stretched out his finger as a pen and drew the word Zui. Instantly, spiritual power surged, and the breath-retaining talisman and invisibility talisman on his body lost their effectiveness at the same time, and his figure was immediately exposed. Not only did the immortal King Darong discover his existence, but Lin Yu also took another look at this place. Boy, you actually hid here silently. The immortal King Darong looked down fiercely, but was unmoved. Last night, he and Lin Yu already knew Zuyun's purpose, which was to break their alliance and prevent them from leaving Qingping Immortal Kingdom. But unexpectedly, the word fall directly acted on the immortal boat. The immortal King Darong only felt his body sink, and the immortal boat turned sharply and fell to the ground. The immortal King Darong's eyes condensed, and the golden light bloomed on his forehead. The pseudo-immortal power in the air flowed and condensed in his palm. Boy, want to drag me down? Then let you taste this palm method of the king falling from the sky. The immortal King Derong half extended his body from the dragon bone and slapped the ground with the palm. Endless golden light descended from the sky and turned into a ferry boat, rushing towards Zuyun. Go first. Zuyun flashed and used the thunder escape technique, but the next moment, when he appeared, he was already standing on the ferry boat. Blue Dragon Fist. As soon as the words fell, the virtual image of the blue dragon took shape. With the sound of the dragon roar that shook the mind, the blue dragon opened its huge mouth and bit towards the fairy King Derong. Sit down for me. The fairy King Derong was horrified. He had never seen such a boxing method from the fairy world. The blue dragon virtual image was so powerful that the power contained in it was not weaker than his pseudo-immortal power. However, the strong men of the fairy country all had the blood of fighting against the demons from outside the domain, and their domineering power was fully revealed at this moment. Immortal King Derong suddenly waved his hand, as if grabbing a golden light out of thin air, and the pseudo-immortal power turned into a sword-like immortal boat, smashing down on the Azure Dragon Phantom. As expected, the Azure Dragon Phantom was hit hard and sat directly on the immortal boat. The immortal boat also accelerated its falling speed, causing Zuyun to almost fall down without standing firmly. However, his original intention was not to fight to the death with Immortal King Derong here. Even if he had the strength to kill Immortal King Derong, it would be impossible to use a killing move here. His purpose was just to lead Immortal King Derong away. Otherwise, Lin Yu would definitely stop absorbing the Yang fire and help Immortal King Derong. After the attack from Immortal King Derong, Zuyun showed a look of horror on his face and turned around and ran. Immortal King Derong sneered, "This boy must not be kept." Just now the Azure Dragon, he made the immortal soul feel the shock. Must kill. Otherwise, if he meets this boy again in the spirit world, I am afraid he will not be his opponent. With this thought in mind, the immortal King Derong roared, and the immortal boat made a muffled sound. The heavenly talisman with the word Zui acting on it was immediately shattered, and then turned the boat's bow and chased after Zuyun fiercely. The golden light passed by, as if tearing through the void, and the wind was whistling. Zuyun could only teleport madly. However, he did not panic at all. As long as he reached a certain distance, the immortal King Derong would slow down. At that time, it was the time for him to really take action. Kingping's immortal power was particularly abundant, which also gave Zuyun's teleportation a bonus. This allowed him to escape at full speed, just like when he was at the broken immortal river. After half an hour, Zuyun found that the speed of the immortal King Derong slowed down again. It was obvious that he was thinking of not chasing Zuyun anymore and planned to return to Lin Yu. Of course, Zuyun would not let him succeed, so he simply stopped and drew another heavenly talisman. Trapped. The word trap took shape and turned into a cage, covering the immortal boat. Boy, I don't want to kill you, but you still want to die. Don't blame me for being rude. The immortal King Derong was furious. Although the immortal boat was descending, he still slapped Zuyun in the direction of his palm. Suinweo fist. Zuyun's eyes shrank. Now was not the best time to sneak attack him, so he chose to defend immediately. A huge tortoise-shell phantom appeared in front of him, meeting the immortal boat that was bombarded by the palm power of the immortal King Derong. Bang! A loud sound rang out. The tortoise shell did not move, but the light and shadow of the immortal boat exploded. But the immortal King Derong had already started to kill, and it was obvious that he would not only have this move. He saw him rise up, golden light flashed under his feet, and he slammed his palm towards the sky again. Bang! 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 With a series of sounds, the strokes of the word stranded shattered. Just when Zuyun's eyes were still on the immortal boat, he saw the immortal King Derong stretched out his palm as a knife and slashed the void. Whoosh! The sound of breaking through the air sounded, and the space was torn apart out of thin air, and a more powerful golden light flew out. Another immortal boat. And this one was even more powerful, far from the one under his feet. No, this old thing has a backup plan. Feeling the majestic aura on this immortal boat, Zhu Yun's face changed drastically. This is definitely not a fake immortal weapon. This may be an immortal weapon. How dare Zhu Yun stay where he is? He immediately used the thunder escape technique, turned into a flash of lightning, and quickly disappeared from the spot. Boy, this king has sacrificed the real immortal boat passed down from his ancestors. Where else can you go? I saw that the immortal King Derong took out a purple to extremely black crystal and pressed it into the immortal boat. Woo! 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 The immortal boat made a sound that did not belong to this world at all, and the golden light shone again. It was impossible to look directly at it. Zhu Yun appeared from a distance with rapid breathing, and the immortal boat quickly locked onto Zhu Yun's position and rushed straight over. The immortal King Derong stood on it, revealing a crazy and sinister smile. Zhu Yun dodged again. At the same time, his mind was spinning rapidly, looking for the right time to summon Zhou Gun. The immortal King Derong had a trump card, and he had predicted it. But this trump card would be an immortal weapon, which was unexpected by Zhu Yun. Boy, you can't run away. The immortal King Derong became more and more crazy, vowing to kill Zhu Yun. In his opinion, once the immortal weapon came out, who would compete? Perhaps, this was his trump card to rebel against the immortal emperor. But he ignored that since Zhu Yun dared to move, he would definitely have his own big move. The immortal soul hammer. When the immortal King Derong sacrificed the immortal boat, the immortal soul hammer in Zhu Yun's mind also glowed with golden light, as if he had an idea of competing with him. If Zhu Yun hadn't suppressed the immortal soul hammer with all his strength, I'm afraid the hammer would have broken out of his brain. Zhu Yun knew that since the immortal soul hammer dared to fight with him, it was obviously a bit confident. But obviously, this was not the best time. To fight with such a person, one must strive to kill with one blow. Zhu Yun's eyes also became resolute and extremely calm. He has been using the thunder escape technique. Compared with teleportation, the thunder escape technique may have some rules, and this is his purpose. Whenever he appears in a position, the immortal boat will immediately turn the keel towards Zhu Yun, and its sensitivity can be imagined. After all, it is an immortal weapon, and Zhu Yun's thunder escape technique is not weak. This is a formula recorded in the 5 Elements Chaos Sutra. Maybe it is also a modified supreme immortal method. And the most important thing is, Zhu Yun has taken a fancy to this immortal boat. If he had this boat in hand, it would be much more convenient for him in the future. A real immortal weapon. Zhu Yun was extremely calm, and he kept using the thunder escape technique to paralyze the divine red of the great wrong immortal king. Finally, he found an opportunity. With the thunder escape technique, he quickly flashed to the back of the great wrong immortal king. With a thought, he also stretched out his hand and swung it. A golden light suddenly appeared, and a figure holding a spear suddenly rushed over. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzhuan Xianxia. Chapter 1344. Zhou Gun. Feeling the endless murderous intent behind him, but a kind of immortal root he had never felt before, the immortal King Derong quickly controlled the immortal root and condensed an inverted immortal boat light and shadow as a shield behind him. When he turned his head, he saw the owner of the spear, who turned out to be his confidant, and he couldn't help but exclaimed, "Your Majesty, I'm sorry." Zhou Gun had a blank expression on his face, and the pseudo-immortal weapon suddenly pierced in. "Zhou Gun, do you think that you can be my enemy just because you have become a top-grade immortal root? Childish." The immortal King Derong stretched out his hand again and slapped the spear hard. "What about a pseudo-immortal weapon?" He was full of disdain, and when his palm power met the spear, he quickly changed his palm into a grasping hand, grabbed the spear head with an extremely exquisite gesture, and pressed it down. Zhou Gun was very surprised. He had only broken through to become a spear immortal route not long ago, and he didn't know how to control the spear. He just relied on instinct and more on pseudo-immortal power to fight. But Zhu Yun understood clearly that this was clearly a martial art. Using martial arts to control pseudo-immortal power, it turned out to be such a wonderful use. In an instant, Zhu Yun remembered his longevity secret. When using the chaotic power, the speed would also increase greatly. So does it mean? Zhu Yun didn't have time to think about it. Zhou Gun was at a disadvantage in the first encounter. If he didn't make a move, Zhou Gun would probably die on the spot. The only thing that surprised the immortal King Derong was Zhou Gun, not someone's sneak attack. It seems that the immortal King Derong is a scheming person. How could he be fooled by him? Zhu Yun didn't hesitate this time, and golden light quickly bloomed on his forehead. The next moment, the immortal soul hammer flew from the center of his eyebrows and fell into his hands. Die! Zhu Yun roared violently, and then controlled the chaotic power in his body, and smashed the back of the immortal King Derong hard. Bang! The immortal King Derong was originally dismissive. No matter how strong Zhu Yun was, he was just a cultivator in the spiritual world. Even if he had abundant spiritual power, what could he do? But he didn't expect that Zhu Yun's spiritual power was not weaker than the pseudo-immortal power. It was the power of chaos. The more pure the chaos power was, the more it would become the power of immortals. It can be said that the current chaos power is also at the same level as the pseudo-immortal power. And the immortal soul hammer is a genuine immortal weapon. The immortal King Derong was hit hard, and his body suddenly stagnated, and the immortal boat under his feet fell rapidly downwards. Zhu Yun's eyes flashed, and he freed up one hand, stretched out his finger as a pen, and drew the word trapped again. Swish! A golden cage trapped the immortal King Derong again. Boy, you are bullying too much. The immortal King Derong let go of Zhou Gun and pinched two inexplicable spells in his hand. In the middle of the immortal boat, the purple-black crystal burst out with an extremely terrifying force. Boom! The huge force stirred up the pseudo-immortal power and the spiritual power, and set off a huge invisible shockwave, which directly blew Zhu Yun and Zhou Gun away. So strong! Zhu Yun finally stabilized his body, and Zhou Gun barely stood on his spear. He couldn't fly in the air, he could only fly with the weapon. Blood flowed from the corner of the mouth of the immortal King Derong, and the immortal boat seemed to have lost its source of power and began to slowly descend, but the immortal King Derong ignored it, and the murderous intent in his eyes locked Zhou Gun first. Traitor, must die. He rose up again, with golden light under his feet, and one hand became a claw, and he arrived in an instant. Zhou Gun! Zhu Yun exclaimed. Zhou Gun's pseudo-immortal weapon was under his feet, and he was no match for the immortal King Derong in terms of bare hands. He quickly teleported and blocked in front of Zhou Gun, and at the same time smashed the immortal soul hammer fiercely. Bang! The immortal King Derong did not dodge or chop, but swung his claws and turned them into fists to blast past. His arms were broken layer by layer, but he did not retreat. Blood gushed out like a spring, and the sky seemed to be raining blood, but it did not delay the offensive of the immortal King Derong at all. His other hand, like a spirit snake out of a hole, fiercely slammed into Zhou Gun's chest. Bang! Zhou Gun flew backwards, spitting blood from his mouth, even more miserable than the immortal King Derong. Zhu Yun's eyes were about to burst. He did not expect the immortal King Derong to be so powerful. At that time, he was in Dian Wangcheng and did not even use 10% of his strength. He hit it deep enough. Zhou Gun! The opponent was in full momentum at the moment, and he could not confront him head-on. Zhu Yun chose to retreat temporarily, and his figure flashed and caught Zhou Gun. Master, cough cough, Am I going to die? Seeing the concerned look on Zhu Yun's face, Zhou Gun felt that it was worth dying. Compared with the immortal King Derong, so many of his men died, but he never frowned. You won't die, Zhu Yun shook his head and said, I'll send you back. You go to the bottom of the world tree, and then let San go inform my master to make an elixir to save you. This is the only thing he can do now. Since Yasuan Hua can refine a pseudo-immortal weapon, it should not be difficult to refine a pseudo-immortal elixir to recover their injuries. The only problem is whether there are the required spiritual medicines in the great universe world. But since Zhou Gun broke through the immortal route in the great universe world, then it stands to reason that there should be some. Without giving Zhou Gun a chance to speak, Zhu Yun has already sent Zhou Gun into the great universe world. Boy, I didn't expect you to have a Tibetan bodyguard. It seems that the demon sect master's guess is right. Derong Immortal King wiped the corner of his mouth and said coldly. He forced himself to be calm, but the ups and downs of his chest already showed that he had suffered a lot of injuries under the immortal soul hammer. Zhu Yun slowly raised his head and smiled. Then, he landed. Boy, not flying anymore. Derong Immortal King raised his eyebrows and chose to land. After landing, his speed would be affected, and the use of his immortal roots would not be as convenient as in the air. But he felt that it was enough to deal with Zhu Yun alone. You have immortal weapons, and I have them too. After landing, he made a move, and the immortal boat immediately turned into a sharp sword and flew over. At this moment, it was like a sword cultivator. But Zhu Yun was least afraid of sword cultivators. He raised his eyebrows. I didn't expect that Immortal King Rong also knows swords. Ha ha ha, Immortal King Daong laughed wildly, even the Immortal Emperor doesn't know my ability. You are just a kid. Even if you collude with the Ji family, what can you do? Our Zhou family actually doesn't look down on this broken world. The fairyland is where our Zhou family can show its strength. Zhu Yun didn't say anything. He saw Immortal King Daong talking about some past events like crazy. It seemed to be venting and showing off. Unfortunately, for Zhu Yun, there was no useful information at all. On the contrary, it made Zhu Yun feel that he would win this battle. The only difference was whether he could safely seize the immortal boat. This immortal boat was infinitely useful. It could be used as a boat and a sword. Although, the Wuji sword art made it irrelevant whether he had a sword or not. But having a sword in hand was always much more convenient. Boy, I've told you so much, you should die too. Suddenly, the immortal King Derong changed the subject, took a delicate step, and attacked Zhu Yun's ribs with a sword. But Zhu Yun showed a strange smile at the corner of his mouth. You know, under what circumstances do ordinary strong men die? What? The immortal King Derong was slightly stunned. Zhu Yun stepped on the Changshengju, but suddenly threw the immortal soul hammer out. The immortal King Derong dodged hurriedly, thinking that Zhu Yun was deliberately delaying the war. Unexpectedly, when he retracted his gaze, Zhu Yun had already thrown out 9 fiery red spirit beads in his hand. Generally, they will die, because they talk too much. 9 spirit beads were arranged in a 9-square grid. The 9-turn-9 yang formation was formed. Hula! A completely different fiery red formation pattern rose into the sky, completely trapping Zhu Yun and the immortal King Derong. Immortal King Derong felt something was wrong and subconsciously raised his head. In the sky, 9 fiery red suns were extremely dazzling. Spiritual world cultivators, so what? Even if they are immortals, I will kill them without hesitation. Zhu Yun's voice came from all directions, and then, 9 suns transformed by fire spirit beads fell at the same time. Huge fireballs, extreme spiritual power. Even if the spiritual power is lower than the power of pseudo-immortal power. But when the spiritual power is compressed to a certain extent, the power that erupts is also extremely terrifying. Boom! 9 spirit beads exploded at the same time in the 9 transformations 9 suns array, and all the spiritual power raged in this small space. Zuyun had already been 10 miles away, watching coldly. He knew that immortal King Derong would die. The only worry was whether the immortal boat could be intact. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1345. Boom. 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 The sky and earth changed color, the wind and clouds stirred, and even Qingping on the horizon was shaken by this spiritual power. Endless fire spiritual power, under the effect of the 9 transformations and 9 suns formation, burst out from the fire spirit pearl at the same time. The yang fire staggered and sprinkled. Finally, the dust settled, leaving only a touch of golden light, shining under the yang fire. It was the flying boat fairy weapon. But Zuyun did not go forward, but released his spiritual consciousness and rushed over there. There was no one. The body of the great wrong immortal king was not seen. Where is the person? Zuyun frowned and held the immortal soul hammer carefully. He would not go forward until he was sure that the great wrong immortal king was really dead. These immortals still had too many means that he did not know. In order to be on the safe side, Zuyun pondered for a moment, and with the immortal boat as the center, he once again used 9 fire spirit beads to set up the 9 transformations and 9 suns formation. After waiting for a while, he found that everything was fine, and then he entered the formation. Immortal weapon, this flying boat is a genuine immortal weapon. The immortal boat was still like a long sword. Zuyun changed the immortal soul hammer to his left hand, and his right hand reached for the immortal boat. After he got it, a burning sensation came from it, which was obviously the residual power in the immortal boat. Not simple, this power is more exquisite than the pseudo-immortal power and the chaotic power. It should be the black and purple crystal he put in before. Zuyun muttered to himself, trying to put the immortal boat into the ring. But after trying for a long time, he couldn't succeed. He slapped his forehead and suddenly realized, this ring is just an ordinary spiritual weapon, and the immortal boat is an immortal weapon. I haven't refined it yet, how can I put it in? With a chuckle, Zuyun chose to throw the immortal boat into the immortal talisman instead of the great universe world. The great universe world is too big. If the immortal boat flies far away, it will be a bit troublesome to find it by himself. After dealing with the immortal boat, Zuyun spread his spiritual consciousness again, but there was still no trace of anyone. Is there really no body left? After walking back and forth in the formation for a long time, Zuyun decided to go back to find one potion after confirming that it really didn't exist. Coming out of the formation, Zuyun looked at a ferry boat in the distance. It was a fake ferry weapon, used by the immortal King Derong to deceive people. Who would have thought that an immortal king would leave the real ferry boat unused and use a fake ferry weapon? Really scheming. Take this ferry boat as well. The things of the immortal King Derong are at least not bad. Zuyun's eyes narrowed and he went towards the ferry boat. The ferry boat had been hit by Zuyun's hammer before, and it was already a little damaged, but it did not affect its use. This is a ferry boat that can be controlled directly with pseudo-immortal power. Zuyun wants to try to use the chaos power. If it can be driven, it's not bad. He stepped onto the ferry boat and found the energy core. When he was about to pass the chaos power into it, another golden light came from a distance. Zuyun quickly held his breath and pressed his body against the ferry boat, but he didn't expect that the golden light was coming straight towards him. His face tightened, and he wondered where the golden light was coming from. After the golden light flew to the ferry boat for more than 100 feet, it stopped, and a deep male voice came. Wrong Xianwang, why did you make such a big fuss at the border? You don't stay in the Derong King City, do you want to make trouble in my Day King City? The tone was very impolite, which made Zuyun's expression relaxed, and at the same time he understood why when he chased here, Derong Xianwang wanted to leave. It turned out that he was going to cross the border. And, listening to this voice, it seemed that the person who came here didn't get along with Derong Xianwang. Derong Xianwang, I came here in person, why don't you say anything? Without hearing a response, De Xianwang raised his voice a few points, and at the same time, golden light appeared on his forehead. It was obvious that he controlled the fairy root and accumulated pseudo-immortal power. Perhaps, he was afraid that the immortal King Daong would launch a surprise attack or something, so he was prepared. Zuyun had no idea about the immortal King Dae, and he did not dare to move rashly. He just looked carefully through the gap on the immortal boat. He saw that the immortal root of the immortal King Dae was a dot, and it was impossible to tell what it looked like. Immortal King Daong, what are you doing? If you don't say anything, don't blame me for going to your immortal boat to take a look. Hearing this, Zuyun's expression became serious. Obviously, the immortal King Dae recognized the immortal King Daong's immortal boat, and since they were not on good terms, he would definitely want to find out the truth without making any noise. Thinking of this, Zuyun's expression became stern. Without knowing the intention of the visitor, he decided to choose to muddle through. Reaching out his hand and quickly drawing a talisman to change the world, Zuyun transformed himself into the appearance of the great wrong immortal king, and then quickly stood up from the corner, looking at the great knight immortal king with a pair of eyes. Seeing the person who suddenly appeared, the great knight immortal king was stunned, and then laughed, "My brother Wrong, what's wrong with you? There is no pseudo-immortal power in your body. Have you been bullied by brother Yan, like a dog that has lost its home?" "Humph," Zuyun pretended, snorted coldly, and did not speak. The great knight immortal king's face suddenly turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "Wrong immortal king, what do you mean? This king just came to see the situation, but he did not cross the line. The immortal emperor recently ordered that we can't fight in Qingping immortal kingdom." Zuyun said calmly, "I didn't cross the border, so what does it have to do with you? Even if the ground here collapses, it's none of your business." De immortal king narrowed his eyes and said, "Wrong immortal king, it's none of my business, but you made too much noise and scared the children in our Day King city." What a joke, Zuyun laughed in his heart. This Day immortal king was too good at making excuses, but he didn't dare to show any clues on his face, so he said, "How many children have been scared? Let them come to my king city, and I can give them some candy." When did wrong immortal king become so polite? Day immortal king raised his eyebrows and said, "You said it, so don't blame me for being rude." After that, he turned around and left without a trace of dragging his feet. Zuyun narrowed his eyes, not knowing whether the great knight immortal king was serious or not, but he didn't take it to heart. After the great knight immortal king disappeared, he tried to control the chaos force into the immortal boat, wanting to see if he could fly the boat back. However, as soon as the chaos force moved, Zuyun suddenly felt a sense of crisis behind him. He was horrified and immediately retracted the chaos force and fled away. It's really a fake. The great knight immortal king actually appeared from the immortal boat out of thin air, his body still maintained an attacking posture, and then looked at the direction where Zuyun appeared. "You are a foreigner from the immortal country, and your disguise skills are not weak. This king was almost fooled by you. Tisk tisk tisk, you used this skill to kill the immortal king wrong, right?" The great knight immortal king retracted his hand and put it behind his back. He did not continue to attack, but looked at Zuyun in the distance with interest. Zuyun stopped pretending, and reached out to wipe his face, restoring his original appearance, and said, "Day immortal king, I have nothing to do with you, I advise you not to meddle in other people's business." "Ha ha ha, what an arrogant foreigner from the immortal kingdom," Day immortal king laughed wildly, and said, "Although I don't get along with Daong immortal king, this is the territory of our Qingping immortal kingdom. If you dare to kill him this time, you may dare to kill me next time. Boy, be smart and surrender, otherwise I will blame you for being rude." Zhu Yun's eyes condensed. He didn't know whether the Immortal King also had the intention of rebellion, otherwise he could have brought out the Immortal Emperor. He has a jade talisman that can contact the Immortal Emperor. Although he doesn't have pseudo-immortal power to drive, the Immortal King has it. But he has always been careful, and the Immortal Emperor's communication jade talisman cannot be exposed for the time being. Anyway, if the Immortal King dares to take action, he doesn't mind killing the other party as well. If it was before, Zhu Yun didn't have such confidence. But when he just collected the immortal weapon, he specially arranged the 9 transformations and 9 suns formation. When he felt that the Great Knight Immortal King was about to take action, he immediately used the thunder escape technique to escape here. As long as he dared to chase him, Zhu Yun would dare to do the same and let him taste the way the Great Wrong Immortal King died. Boy, tell me, did you kill the Great Wrong Immortal King? Seeing that Zhu Yun stopped talking, the Great Knight Immortal King also moved suddenly, flashed in front of Zhu Yun, and stretched out his hand to pinch his neck. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1346. Want to fight? Not that easy. Seeing the pseudo-immortal power floating on his palm, Zhu Yun retreated into the 9 transformations 9 suns formation with just one step. The Great Knight Immortal King was not surprised that his move failed, and took advantage of the situation to bully Zhu Yun's forehead with his hands. But as soon as he moved his feet, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. The formation. The Great Knight Immortal King was shocked and immediately reacted. This kid wanted to fool him before, but then he suddenly changed his tone, obviously relying on something. He hurriedly stopped and retreated along the original path. But when he stepped in, Zhu Yun had already activated the formation. How could he retreat back? After taking a few steps, the scene in front of him did not return to its original state, and the Great Knight Immortal King was a little surprised. Not only that, Zhu Yun was also silent and was not within his sight at all. Boy, come out for me, don't play tricks. The Great Knight Immortal King couldn't help but shout. But the voice only echoed in the formation, and there was no trace of Zhu Yun. Zhu Yun was standing quietly in a place in the formation at this moment, preparing to control 9 spirit beads to hit the Great Knight Immortal King. Take a good look at what kind of immortal root the round bead in front of his brow is. 9 yang-linked beads, smash it for me. He pinched the formation formula between his hands, and 9 spirit beads fell at the same time, just like the scene when he bombarded the Great Wrong Immortal King at that time. Zhu Yun was not unfamiliar, and even because of previous experience, the timing of the 9 spirit beads bombarding at the same time was tighter. Not good. Feeling the majestic breath coming from his head, even if he could not sense the existence of spiritual power, the sun transformed by the fire spirit bead was extremely powerful. He looked up and his face suddenly changed. His feet began to move constantly, trying to avoid the attack range of the sun. But the formation had already restricted his range of activities, and the Great Knight Immortal King had nowhere to escape. Knowing that he could no longer avoid it, the Great Knight Immortal King suddenly took out a golden bead from his arms. Then, the immortal root on his forehead lit up, and countless pseudo-immortal powers poured into the golden bead. The golden bead shone brightly, and then shone with brilliance, forming a solid semicircular shield. Want to block it? Can you block it? Zhu Yun took another look at the bead, but due to the dazzling golden light, he did not see the full appearance of the bead, but he always had a feeling that this bead did not seem to have much to do with the spirit bead, but in a faint sense, it seemed a little familiar. Pseudo-immortal weapon? Zhu Yun reserved his opinion. After all, the Immortal King Daong had an immortal weapon, so who could guarantee that the Immortal King Day did not have one? Boom! The 9 fire spirit beads exploded almost at the same time, and exploded on the golden light shield. And Zhu Yun had already left the 9 transformations 9 yang formation. After all, the spiritual power of the 9 spirit beads when they exploded did not distinguish between enemies and friends. He had no confidence to block it. At this moment, the jade talisman in Zhu Yun's arm suddenly vibrated, and he quickly took it out. It was the immortal emperor looking for him. Zhu Yun, something bad has happened. The immortal King Daong is dead. The voice of the immortal emperor came from the other side. Dead? It's good that he's dead. Zhu Yun breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. Without waiting for the immortal emperor's surprise to fade away, he continued, he wanted to kill me, so I killed him. What, you killed him? The tone of the immortal emperor suddenly became strange. Yes, I killed him, Zhu Yun continued, the immortal King Daong wanted to rebel, so I killed him not long ago. But there is no body left, and I'm not sure if he is really dead. He is dead, said the immortal emperor, I thought something big happened. As long as you killed him, it's okay. Hearing the sigh of relief from the other side, Zhu Yun raised his eyebrows and continued, well, the immortal King Day may die soon. What did you say? The immortal emperor opened his mouth wide and looked at the jade talisman in his hand with disbelief. This Zhu Yun. Why did he go to kill the immortal king? As for killing the immortal King Daong, he could still understand it. After all, as soon as Zhu Yun arrived at the immortal kingdom, he was in the jurisdiction of the immortal King Daong, and it was inevitable that there would be some conflicts. And he also understood that the immortal King Daong had always had ulterior motives. It was just that the immortal kingdom of Qingping needed stability, so he temporarily endured it. If he killed him, it would be the best. The other immortal kings would not be able to find fault with him, and he could stay out of it. But the immortal King Day. Zhu Yun, give me a face, the immortal King Day, cannot die. The immortal emperor's tone softened and he said in a plea. The immortal King Day wanted to kill me, so I killed him. Originally, I didn't know him, don't you think? Zhu Yun was a little surprised. The immortal emperor actually pleaded for an immortal king? Then it was obvious that the immortal King Day was one of the few immortal kings that the immortal emperor could trust. However, the 9 transformations and 9 suns formation had been activated, and all 9 spirit beads had exploded. Whether he lived or died depended on his own luck. Immortal Emperor, I have already taken action, using the formation to blow him up, I don't know if he will die. Immortal Emperor said anxiously, if you don't continue to attack, it will be fine. Day Immortal King has a way to save his life. Hearing that he was just trapped by the formation, the Immortal Emperor was slightly relieved. After all, he was too far away and could not help at all. Whether he lives or dies, it depends on Zhu Yun's face. Zhu Yun, you will give him the jade talisman later, and I will let him obey you temporarily, how about it? Zhu Yun raised his eyebrows and said, Immortal Emperor, we are just cooperating for the time being. To be honest, I don't completely trust you. There is one thing that has not yet been solved in Qingping Immortal Kingdom, and that is the Jidan sect. Shuajia went out with the people from Jidan sect, but Zhu Yun didn't know that Qingping Fairy Kingdom was used by Jidan sect as a back garden for collecting smoke soul powder. The Immortal Emperor said that Yanhan powder was destroyed in a centralized manner, but during this period, no matter how many hands it went through, there would inevitably be some tricks. I know, the Immortal Emperor gave a wry smile and said, you must have fought with the Immortal King of Darong to lure him here, right? Immortal King Day is one of the secret agents of the Emperor who monitors the Immortal King of Darong. Wait. Please give him the jade talisman, and I can speak to him in front of you. Zhu Yun was still deep in thought, and the Immortal Emperor continued, Zhu Yun, Immortal King Darong is dead, and someone needs to take over his jurisdiction, otherwise there will be chaos in the Immortal Kingdom. Although I also want to ascend, but here the immortal people are the foundation of the immortal kingdom, they can't let anything happen to them. Without the protection of the immortal king, it would be difficult for them to resist the beast tide. Zuyun witnessed 3 beast tides, and the last time he used totem poles to bring in all the snake monsters. He rolled his eyes and asked, "Immortal Emperor, what is going on with the beast tide here?" The Immortal Emperor was silent for a while, and then said, "It's a long story, and I can't finish it in just a few words. If you want to know, I want to have a face-to-face meeting with you. When will you come to see me? Originally, I was going to find you, but something like the great wrong Immortal King happened. By the way, I forgot to tell you that the great wrong Immortal King wanted to kill me because I wanted to stop the people of the Demon Moon sect." Zuyun once again revealed some news, causing the Immortal Emperor to exclaim in surprise. "Moyo sect? Have they found a way to enter here?" This voice did not seem to be fake, but he did not see the expression of the Immortal Emperor in person, and Zuyun would not believe everything. He just said lightly, "Immortal King Durong is leaving the Immortal Kingdom with Master Mou. If he goes out, I'm afraid I don't know what will happen." "Immortal Emperor, you care about the immortal people of the Immortal Kingdom, why don't I worry about the ordinary monks in the spiritual world? I didn't expect you to." Hearing Zuyun's words, the Immortal Emperor was also greatly surprised. He knew that Zuyun was a casual cultivator, but hadn't he heard those monks in the spiritual world say that the spiritual world kills people and seizes treasures, and treats people with weak realms as ants? Nothing strange. Zuyun squinted his eyes, feeling that some things would be better if they were discussed face to face, and the beast tide issue. If all these monsters could be brought into the universe, would it be able to bring about changes in the universe? With this thought, Zuyun's murderous intention towards the Great Knight Immortal King was much lessened. With the Immortal King's endorsement, there was no need to kill the Great Knight Immortal King if he surrendered. Besides, the cause of the matter was not a conflict between them. At this time, the formation had been exploded, all 9 spirit beads had turned into powder and ceased to exist, and the spiritual power had also dissipated between heaven and earth. Zuyun looked over and saw that the Great Knight Immortal King was unhurt. However, he was so weak that he half knelt on the ground, holding up the golden bead. The semicircular shield has been shattered layer by layer. Indeed, as long as he takes action, the Great Knight Immortal King will definitely die. It seemed that the Immortal Emperor did not lie to him, at least on this point. Zuyun held the jade talisman and walked slowly towards the Great Knight Immortal King. "You, don't come over." The Great Knight Immortal King looked extremely panicked. How could he still have the calm expression before? "I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills." Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1347. Zuyun curled his lips. The Great Knight Immortal King was really lucky. If the Immortal King hadn't happened to be looking for him, he would have killed the Great Knight Immortal King no matter what. It seems that these Immortal Kings are nothing more than that. It's just a question of how many means there are. If Immortal King Durong hadn't relied on his immortal weapon, he might have done it effortlessly. It seems that the different cultivation systems will not bring about essential differences. As long as you are strong, that is the last word. He did not approach the Great Knight Immortal King directly, but threw the jade talisman in his hand directly. The Great Knight Immortal King took it with a confused look on his face, somewhat unable to understand what Zuyun meant. Until the Immortal Emperor's voice rang. "King Yesyen, Zuyun is my friend. Don't let the floods wash away the Dragon King Temple." As soon as these words came out, the Great Knight Immortal King trembled all over, and then he breathed a long sigh of relief. Fortunately, otherwise, he would have been the only one to be charged. "It's all a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding." The Great Knight Immortal King smiled awkwardly at Zuyun, and then stood up. "You should first listen to what the Immortal Emperor has planned." Zuyun pursed his lips. In just one stick of incense, the great knight Immortal King already had a rough idea. And the Immortal Emperor made a request that surprised Zuyun, that is, let him follow him to King Darong's city to help Zuyun. Zuyun didn't have any objections to this. At the very least, he could go back on the flying boat of the Immortal King Darong. Friend Zhu, I'm really sorry. On top of the immortal boat, the great knight Immortal King continued to pour pseudo-immortal power into it, still a little embarrassed on his face. It doesn't matter, Zuyun waved his hand casually, then looked at the eyebrows of the great knight Immortal King and said, "You are he Xianxia. It's interesting to watch. I am the Pearl Immortal Root." Pearl Immortal Root? What's the magic use of it? Zuyun lowered his head slightly and looked at his hand. The other person was still holding the shining golden bead. Observing from such a close distance, and the great knight Immortal King did not shy away from it, Zuyun could see clearly. It doesn't have any magical effect, but you can use some beads, which will have an effect. For example, fellow Taoist Zhu, did you use the fire spirit beads in your formation earlier? I didn't expect that the spirit beads would have such a wonderful effect. Zuyun smiled and said, "You can see that, yes, it is the spiritual power in the spirit beads. Can you, with your pearl fairy roots, also use the spirit beads?" I tried it before, but I felt that the spiritual power in the spirit beads was not as lethal as the pseudo-immortal power, so I gave it up. Today is an eye-opener. Thinking of what he had just experienced in 9 turns and 9 yangs, the great knight Immortal King felt lingering fear. Zuyun shook his head and said, "The spiritual power in the spirit beads is actually very strong. It's just that your cultivation is different from ours, and you can't feel the magical effects of spiritual power. And I use formations to gather all the spiritual power together, not to mention, it broke out at the same time and killed the great Immortal King. Of course, your bead is not bad. Without the protection of this bead, I am afraid that the same thing happened to you and the great Immortal King." And what fellow Daoist Zhu said is true, the Immortal King agreed deeply and said, "This bead is different from the spirit bead. Because this bead can help store pseudo-immortal power, I was able to condense the shield in the end." You mean this bead can store pseudo-immortal power? Zuyun originally thought that this bead corresponded to the Blood Moon spirit bead, and might be the Yang Fire spirit bead. Unexpectedly, it was a fake fairy bead. Yes, I call it a pseudo-immortal bead. However, this bead has been warmed by my natal immortal blood for tens of thousands of years before it can be so effective. Otherwise, if fellow Taoist Zhu is interested, there is no harm in giving it to fellow Taoist Zhu. Zuyun narrowed his eyes and said, "So, do you still have any empty fake fairy beads?" "Yes, there are. Although there are few such beads, because I am the Pearl Immortal Root, I also collect them. But, there are not many." As he spoke, the great knight Immortal King stretched out his hand to create a crack in the space in front of his eyes, and 3 identical beads flew out from it. Zuyun has already seen the methods of the great Immortal King, and knows their abilities. They usually don't have any storage bags or sumi rings. This method is quite mysterious. Maybe only the level of pseudo-immortal power is higher than spiritual power, so it can be made. After taking the 3 beads, Zuyun looked at them carefully in his hands. The great knight Immortal King said, "Friend Daoist, if you also have immortal roots, you can control the pseudo-immortal power and charge it into it. We people in the immortal country cannot store pseudo-immortal power in our bodies. Compared with you, there is indeed a difference." Zuyun nodded with a smile, but did not speak. He thought he had a chance to give it a try and see if he could infuse the power of chaos into it. He couldn't feel any attributes of this bead, it was just a blank bead. Maybe the great knight Immortal King felt that the pseudo-immortal bead in his hand was enough, so he didn't nourish it with immortal blood. After thinking about it, Zuyun asked, "How do you warm up the pseudo-immortal beads?" He tried to penetrate his spiritual consciousness into it, but was blocked. Perhaps the beads were of a higher level than him. I swallowed it directly into my belly, and then absorbed the pseudo-immortal power to enter it, so that I could leave my mark on it. At this point, the great knight immortal king couldn't help but smile bitterly. I spent a lot of money at that time. It took 100 years to succeed, and finally I was appreciated by the immortal emperor. Otherwise, I would be just an ordinary immortal citizen now. I see. Zuyun secretly remembered it in his heart, and decided to try again in the immortal mansion when he had time. Anyway, practicing there, the chaos power would not be used up. However, I don't know what happened to the bedroom. Those demonic energies. After putting away the 3 fake fairy beads, Zuyun concentrated on them, sitting cross-legged on the ferry boat, absorbing and refining the spiritual power in the air, thereby restoring the chaos power he had consumed. The great knight immortal king drove the immortal boat meticulously and rushed towards the king of Darong city. More than an hour later, they finally saw the king of Darong city. And further away, thousands of golden lights in the sky met a round blood moon. Not finished yet. Zuyun's eyes narrowed and he suddenly stood up from the ferry boat. Blessings to fellow Taoist, over there. The great knight immortal king also looked shocked, even though the immortal king told him that an enemy appeared and asked him to help Zuyun. But the momentum displayed by Lin Yu had already shocked him. Zuyun frowned and said, "The other party's morale is very good. If we approach directly, we may be asking for trouble. In this case, you do as I say." Zuyun made a prompt decision and first drew a talisman of changing the world and changing the world, replacing the great knight immortal king with the appearance of the great wrong immortal king. And they were sitting on the immortal boat of the immortal king Darong, so they believed they could temporarily paralyze Lin Yu. Then, Zuyun hid himself in the cabin again, using the cover of the cabin to prepare to take action. A sneak attack to overcome the tribulation period. This is something he has never done before. But now, Wan Potion's situation is not good. He is retreating steadily. Being able to persist for so long obviously exceeded expectations. Old man Wan, hold on a little longer. Zuyun murmured in his heart, and the great knight immortal king was already approaching Lin Yu. Wan Potion also thought it was the immortal king Darong who had returned. He spat out a mouthful of blood essence and dropped it toward the ground. At the same time, he shouted loudly, "Zhou Pang, take me and run." As soon as he landed, a black shadow suddenly appeared and quickly enveloped Wan Potion. Then the black shadow disappeared and disappeared. But Zuyun knew that with Wan Potion's temperament, it was impossible to escape directly, and he would definitely stay where he was to see the situation. Then, as long as he takes action, Wan Potion will appear again after seeing it. Knight Immortal King, hurry up. Under Zuyun's urging, the great knight immortal king approached Lin Yu. Before he could speak, Lin Yu looked over and saw the immortal boat of the great wrong immortal king. There was also the great wrong immortal on the boat. The king couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief and said in a cold voice, "King Rongxian, help our sect protect the law and don't let any young people disturb us anymore." Good. The great knight immortal king also knew that too much words would lead to mistakes, so he only replied with one word and continued to lean towards Lin Yu. Zuyun's face was gloomy. He didn't expect that Lin Yu would not ask the great knight immortal king to go with him to eliminate the roots. If so, his timing for a sneak attack would not be so good. The arrow was on the string and had to be fired. "King Xian, get as close to him as possible, and then you and I will take action together." Zuyun whispered, and Immortal King Darong nodded solemnly. And Lin Yu, at this time, continued to take out the piece of Ruyi and began to absorb Yang Huo. Good opportunity. Zuyun's eyes were focused, and he was already clenching his fists, ready to go. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1348. Do it. Following Zuyun's low shout, the great knight Immortal King took out his pseudo-immortal bead, glowed with countless bead-shaped golden lights, and blasted towards Lin Yu overwhelmingly. At the same time, Zhu Yun also used the Sifang Divine Beast Fist. Suzaku Fist. A flaming red Suzaku phantom flew out of the fist. Zhu Yun did not stop and punched again. White Tiger Fist. With 2 consecutive punches and the attack of the great knight Immortal King, Lin Yu immediately sensed the danger and it was too late to stop him. The beads formed by pseudo-immortal power have an extremely wide range. Even if she uses teleportation, she may not be able to escape from the covered area. At the critical moment, Lin Yu put away the Ruyi pseudo-immortal weapon and took out her own Blood Moon Spirit bead. Boom! The red light bloomed and instantly enveloped Lin Yu. The phantoms of Suzaku and White Tiger collided with the Blood Moon light curtain almost at the same time, causing the heaven and earth to tremble. And the attacks of the great knight Immortal King were also bombarded one by one. For a time, 5 different powers, spiritual power, sun fire, blood moon power, pseudo-immortal power, and chaos power, were completely intertwined together, blooming in the sky like fireworks. Also at this time, under the ground, a golden light appeared. Wanjian Chaozong. Wan Potion is here too. Countless golden sword shadows, from bottom to top, all swords fired in unison, attacked towards the blood moon light curtain. As Zhu Yun guessed, Wan Potion did not escape, but chose to stay where he was and wait for the opportunity. The moment Zhu Yun took action, he did it without any hesitation. Do your best and leave no room for anything. Under such a heavy blow, Blood Moon Light Curtain finally discovered the sound of glass shattering. Zhu Yun was overjoyed. If Lin Yu couldn't stop him, she would definitely die. Give it a try. Zhu Yun turned his hand into a palm, Chaos Palm. Within the body, the chaos power of a lotus heart was quickly drained away, and a huge palm condensed by the chaos power slapped it over. Boom! There was another loud noise, and the light curtain finally couldn't hold on and shattered layer by layer. However, the next moment, everyone was stunned. Behind the light curtain, there is no one. Lin Yu ran away. Damn it! Zhu Yun was so angry that he didn't find any clues. Boy Zhu Yun, where did the witch go? Wan Potion also flew over, very weak. He tried his best, and it was good to be able to fly. Zhu Yun said in a deep voice, I don't know, maybe he has some mysterious tricks. What should we do? Wan Potion couldn't help but look worried. Facts have proved that he is no match for Lin Yu. If he is not eradicated at this time, there will be endless troubles. Now, I can only ask for help from one person. Zhu Yun was extremely solemn, took out the communication jade talisman from his arms, and looked at the great knight Immortal King. I wish fellow Taoist would let me contact the Immortal Emperor. Yes, Zhu Yun nodded and said, I cannot control the pseudo-immortal power and activate this communication jade talisman. Leave it to me. The Immortal King told the great knight Immortal King that Zhu Yun should take the lead in everything, and he did not refuse. At the same time, he also knew that he and Lin Yu were also opposites. Although she didn't know who Lin Yu was or what her strength was, the 3 of them worked together and tried their best but still let the other party run away, which shows that she is extremely powerful. If she was allowed to hide in the dark, they wouldn't be able to get anything done at all. Zhu Yun. After the great knight Immortal King transferred the pseudo-immortal power into it, the Immortal King's doubtful voice immediately came from there. It's me, Zhu Yun said immediately, can you calculate where Lin Yu is at this time? He ran away. The Immortal Emperor was also shocked. Hearing Zhu Yun's tone, he thought they had failed. Unexpectedly, this current leader of the Demon Moon sect is so powerful? Yes, she ran away without leaving any trace. Zhu Yun needed to determine Lin Yu's location before making plans. Okay, wait a moment. The other end of the jade talisman immediately became quiet, and the Immortal Emperor also began to tell fortunes. After a moment, the immortal emperor's voice came. Lin Yu is still in the fairyland, but she seems to be protected by something. I can't calculate it clearly. I only know the approximate location. Where? Ultimate East. Zhu Yun thought for a moment and said, Immortal Emperor, it will be difficult for Lin Yu to live peacefully until she is eliminated. You should pay attention to her movements as much as possible. If there is any news, please contact me in time. I will rush to the Imperial City now. The Immortal Emperor was suddenly confused. Zhu Yun also said that he would get rid of Lin Yu as soon as possible and that he would come to the Imperial City. This was contradictory. What on earth was he going to do? However, the Immortal Emperor did not ask any more questions. Zhu Yun was careful and not any weaker than the Immortal Emperor himself. Okay, I will sweep the couch to welcome you. After stopping communication, Zhu Yun said to the Great Knight Immortal King, the Immortal King has previously ordered you to handle the matters in Darong King City. I am leaving. Friend Zhu, don't you need my help? The Great Knight Immortal King's heart skipped a beat for no reason. He was afraid that Lin Yu would come back and kill him, and he would be the only one left. But what should he do? No need, and you don't need to worry. Lin Yu will definitely not dare to come back. In this way, you can use this immortal boat to send me and old man Wan to Duxian town. Good. An hour later, the immortal boat landed in Duxian town, and the Great Knight Immortal King returned the same way. Wan Potion couldn't help but said, Boy Zhu Yun, Lin Yu is missing, what are we doing in the Imperial City? Zhu Yun glanced at him sideways and said, since Lin Yu is still in Qingping Immortal Kingdom and has not returned to the Immortal Secret Realm, it means that she was seriously injured. And I know the purpose of her coming here, so I need find the Immortal Emperor, and then, let's go back to the spirit world. Lin Yu's purpose. Wan Potion narrowed his eyes and said, Boy, is there anything you can't tell me? Zhu Yun chuckled lightly and said, not for the time being, but you will know when the time comes. Now, quickly restore your pseudo-immortal power, and then we will use this immortal boat to go to the Imperial City. Seeing Zhu Yun say this, Wan Potion didn't feel comfortable asking questions, so he just sat on the ground and filled his body with pseudo-immortal power. Because it does not require refining, it is very fast. Less than half an hour later, Wan Potion had already stood up. Let's go. The ferry boat started and flew towards the Imperial City. Zhu Yun then expressed his guess, Lin Yu has been seriously injured and is hiding. Generally speaking, a demon cultivator like her can escape without making a sound, which consumes a lot of money. So, we have time, but not much. Wan Potion was convinced and said, indeed, but when did you hook up with the Immortal Emperor? What is hooking up? Zhu Yun disdainfully said, we just have the same purpose. When we get to the Imperial City, you and I, plus the Immortal Emperor, will go to the spirit world together, and get ahead of the spirit world too. When the words came to his lips, Zhu Yun quickly swallowed them back. His purpose was indeed to snatch the Blood Moon Immortal artifact. In this way, even if Lin Yu collects the Yang Fire and returns to the Ascension Secret Realm, it will be of no use. What? Boy, can you stop showing off? Will I still be your enemy? Really? Wan Potion cursed, but Zhu Yun refused to say anything. Under Wan Potion's full force, the immortal boat landed in the Imperial City a few hours later. Zhu Yun, and you are, the Shiji immortal official who retired from old age and returned to his hometown. The Immortal Emperor still has some impression, remembering Wan Potion. I've seen the Immortal Emperor. Wan Potion didn't explain and just bowed his hands in greeting. Logically speaking, one should kneel down, but for Zhu Yun's sake, the Immortal Emperor did not pay attention to these red tapes. After introducing the two people into the palace, the Immortal Emperor said, Zhu Yun, do you have any other plans? There is no plan, Zhu Yun shook his head and said, Now go try the formation and open the passage from Qingping Fairy Kingdom to the spirit world. The immortal emperor was startled, stood up suddenly, and said, now. Yes, now. If Lin Yu goes back before us, the daylilies may be cold. Seeing Zhu Yun being so determined, the immortal emperor also looked solemn and said, okay, then follow me. The two of them followed the immortal emperor and arrived at the immortal emperor's palace. I saw the immortal emperor turned over his bed, and a secret passage appeared. This is. Zhu Yun frowned. The immortal king smiled bitterly and said, if the other immortal kings know that I am preparing to leave the immortal kingdom, I am afraid there will be constant trouble. After all, except for the great knight immortal king who was trained by me, the other immortal kings have more or less selfish motives. Zhu Yun understood clearly in his heart and did not dwell on it. He nodded and followed the immortal emperor down. At the bottom of the secret passage, there is a large formation glowing with golden light. And that formation pattern was somewhat familiar to Zhu Yun. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills. Author, Banzuan Xianxia. Chapter 1349. Is this a teleportation array? Zhu Yun did not shy away and spoke directly. There seems to be no other way out here, and the immortal emperor brought them here to go somewhere else. There is no other way except the teleportation array. Yes, teleportation array. The immortal emperor also admitted it, with a surprised expression on his face, and said, now that I believe it, I wish you fellow Taoists to become a master of formation. I don't dare to take it as a master. Zhu Yun waved his hand and said, I just encountered the teleportation array several times. He wanted to know where this teleportation array would lead. I can't help but wonder in my mind, will it be teleported directly to the mortal world? Have you ever encountered this, fellow Taoist? The immortal emperor's movements were stagnant, and he quickly asked, do these formations look the same? There are still some differences. Zhu Yun took another look and said, maybe it's because this formation is driven by pseudo-immortal power, right? It's possible, the immortal emperor said, this formation was actually created by me following ancient books and having some immortals set it up. It took tens of thousands of years to be able to teleport it to another place. Immortal Emperor, this other place you are talking about, is that the Immortal Mountain? The fairy mountain in Zhu Yun's mouth is naturally the Kunlun Canyon. I'm not sure. The Immortal Mountain seems to have no end, but what I'm sure of is that it can be teleported to the real source of the broken Immortal River. Zhu Yun was startled and said, the source of the Duanxian River? How can you be sure? I learned from Xiaolu that the Duanxian River and the Wild Sea are connected. Well, it's certain, but I always feel that there is some difference between this source and the canyon of Fairy Mountain. Really? Zhu Yun thought it was impossible, but he was eager to leave and said, without further ado, please ask the Immortal Emperor to activate this formation. Let's go to the Immortal Mountain to see it again. Please. The Immortal Emperor made a gesture and asked Zhu Yun and Wan Potion to enter the formation together. Then he took out 2 purple crystal stones and placed them in several holes of the formation one by one. Then, he quickly stood beside Zhu Yun. After a few breaths, a shock was felt under his feet, and soon Zhu Yun felt the power in the purple crystal drain away, pouring all of it into the formation eyes, and then filling it along the formation lines. The formation also lit up with golden brilliance. Until all the golden light enveloped them, the 3 of them felt an extremely powerful space-tearing force. As time went by, the tearing force of space became more and more intense, and Zhu Yun was unable to use the power of chaos in his body to hold on. He was familiar with this tearing force. This was always the case when I passed the teleportation array several times in the past. However, the force I endured every time was never as strong as today. Finally, just when the chaos power in Zhu Yun's body was about to be exhausted, the formation stopped. The golden light dissipated, and a group of 3 people appeared in a mountain forest. Seeing the completely different situation from Kunlun Canyon, Zhu Yun was also dumbfounded. Except for the fairy mist that permeates everywhere, there is nothing similar between this place and the Kunlun Canyon. In my ears, I heard the sound of gurgling water. Is this the source of the Duanxian River? Zhu Yun frowned, somewhat disbelieving. He was looking around when he heard the immortal emperor say, "The fairy mist here will not corrode the fairy roots, so what I plan to do is to break out from here. But after trying many times, this place seems like it's like a trap, trapping us in circles." Zhu Yun turned around and said, "Did you lie to me?" The immortal emperor sighed and said, "Friend Zhu, you didn't completely believe me at first, so naturally I can't reveal all the secrets. At the beginning, what the immortal emperor and Zhu Yun said was to set up a formation in the immortal mountain to block the immortal mist, and then fly out from it. But at this time, they were in the fairy mist." After hearing the immortal king's words, Zhu Yun actually understood in his heart. After all, he was indeed on guard against the immortal king. "So, you want to break the trap here now?" "That's right," the immortal emperor said with a sparkle in his eyes. "No one can understand the formation here. Those formation masters who arranged the teleportation formation for me have also been here, but they were unable to escape from the trapped formation. However, they can actually feel the meager spiritual power here." Zhu Yun did not speak, but Wan Potion frowned and said something shocking. "Zhu Yun, this seems to be the mortal world." "Mortal world?" Zhu Yun's eyes widened with disbelief on his face. "A teleportation array came directly to the mortal world?" "Yes, it's the mortal world," Wan Potion said in a deep voice. "Those formation masters should be monks born and raised in the spiritual world. They have never been to the mortal world, so after arriving here, they felt that the spiritual power here was thin. I thought it was the junction of the immortal kingdom and the spiritual world, so I made the wrong judgment. But I came from the mortal world, and even, I can be sure that this place should be Yunzhou and Chuzhou. The intersection of Misty Mountain Forest." Zhu Yun exclaimed and blurted out. "Aren't there just misty mountains and forests between Yunzhou and Chuzhou?" Looking at the fog again at this time, Zhu Yun really remembered that it was exactly the same as the aura at that time. At that time, his wooden incarnation used the 5 elements Sanren's teleportation order. Because he did not use the power of chaos, he was teleported here. The formation arranged by the immortal emperor was obtained from their ancient books. And the teleportation order of the 5 elements Sanren is not something from the spiritual world. Therefore, there is an inevitable connection between them. Zhu Yun breathed quickly, and forced himself to suppress this idea, saying, "If this is the mortal world, then maybe we can go out directly. However, going to the spirit world and rushing to Kunlun is going in the opposite direction." The immortal emperor didn't understand what the two were talking about, but he understood what Zhu Yun meant, and said, "If you want to go back, just put amethyst under your feet." The amethyst is the purple crystal. Zhu Yun lowered his head and looked at the array pattern under his feet, thinking, and said, "We should rush over as soon as possible, it should be in time. Lin Yu is seriously injured, and it will definitely not be enough for 10 days or half a month. Zhu Yun, since you know this place, then I will naturally listen to you." At this point, the immortal emperor no longer called himself the emperor. Zhu Yun nodded and said, "I am familiar with this place, you follow me." He had several experiences of rushing from the mortal world. After slightly determining the direction, he led the 2 people to rush out of the array. The last time he came, he did know that there was an array here. But he didn't pay much attention to it at that time. This trap array is not difficult, but the array masters of the immortal emperor have completely thought in the wrong direction. A wrong step in the array, all wrong steps. Under the leadership of Zhu Yun, they soon appeared at the edge of the array wall. Immortal Emperor, see if you can get out. At the last step, Zhu Yun's expression became a little nervous. Okay. Success or failure depends on this. The Immortal Emperor's face also became solemn, and he took a step slowly. Nothing happened, he disappeared directly in front of the two people. Zhu Yun's expression was happy, and he said, "Old one, you get out too. Ha ha ha, I didn't expect that I could still return to the mortal world." Wan Potion laughed wildly and walked out. Zhu Yun followed closely and walked out, but saw the two people with extremely strange faces. It was still this misty mountain village, and there were still many low-level cultivators in the village. They were busy, and they were slightly surprised to see Wan Potion and the Immortal Emperor. When Zhu Yun followed their gaze, he suddenly realized. It turned out that the two men saw his huge statue. What a fuss! Zhu Yun laughed and said, "Let's go, don't attract people here, we are in a hurry." Zhu Yun, the Immortal Emperor, turned around and said in confusion, "Do you think collecting the power of faith is a trivial matter?" Wan Potion also kept looking at Zhu Yun and said, "Zhu Yun, you dare to collect the power of faith in your humming transformation stage? Can your body withstand it?" The two mentioned the power of faith one after another, but Zhu Yun suddenly remembered something and couldn't help but be stunned. "I started my cultivation by picking up the immortal skills." Author, Ban Zhuan Xianxia. Chapter 1350. He knew the power of faith, but he didn't know that what gathered on the statue and then rushed to the sky was the power of faith. And because of those golden lights when breaking through the divine transformation stage, Zhu Yun couldn't help but become excited. There is no doubt that in the entire mortal world, wherever there are people, there are statues of him. So, was the breakthrough at that time due to the power of these beliefs that directly broke into the universe? If this is the case, then the power of faith. How terrifying! And if he masters this power, his strength will make a qualitative leap. It's no wonder that even though he is only in the God transformation stage, he can handle it with ease under the hands of some people in the tribulation stage. Wan Potion is like a human spirit. Seeing Zhu Yun's reaction, he knew that Zhu Yun didn't know why this happened at all. Instead, he said, "Let's talk later. I believe the Immortal Emperor will have a deeper understanding. Let's go first, it's important to do business." The Immortal Emperor also said, "Don't worry, Zhu Yun. There is an immortal book handed down from my ancestors in the palace, which mentions the power of faith. I will give it to you when the time comes." Good. Zhu Yun was extremely excited. While he was stunned, some young monks recognized him and knelt on the ground, shouting that Zhu Xian was here in person. At the same time, he also saw some subtle golden light shooting out from the heads of these people, sinking into his eyebrows, and finally being absorbed by the immortal soul hammer in Zi Mansion. He had a clear understanding in his heart that the power of faith might be at the same level as immortal power. In the mortal world, the Immortal Emperor cannot control the pseudo-immortal power. Although Wan Potion can sense the spiritual power, he cannot move and can only stare. Zhu Yun laughed and took out the fire dragon boat. That flying boat he got from the fire dragon sect. Walk. He casually took out a few high-grade spiritual stones and scattered them in the misty village. Then he flew the two of them to the flying boat through the air, and then flew away through the air. Young monks, have you ever seen a high-grade spiritual stone? They were almost going crazy. While picking up the spirit stones, they were mumbling words, all of which were thanksgiving to Zhu Yun. Whoever picks up the spirit stone belongs to him, and no one will be jealous at all. This is the mortal world today. Boy Zhu Yun, Wan Potion saw all this scene, put his head back out of the flying boat, and said to Zhu Yun, "It seems that you have done great things in the mortal world. What do you think of this?" Zhu Yun asked rhetorically. In the mortal world where I was back then, it was common to kill people and seize treasures. But you just threw out so many high-grade spiritual stones. Although there was a scramble for them, there was no fighting. Look at the details in everything. This scene is a glimpse of the leopard. Zuyun smiled and did not explain. To be honest, he was not too clear. He alone cannot achieve this level. It was all caused spontaneously by those nascent soul monks. However, he also thought of the Xianguang sect again and the scene he encountered in the secret realm of Xianxia. The power of faith radiated by those monks in the spiritual world is even stronger. Let's go to Barren Rock Mountain first. After a long time, the flying boat landed in the teleportation array at Barren Rock Mountain. Seeing this formation, the Immortal Emperor was shocked. This formation? Yes, this formation is a major formation in the mortal world. You can go to his hometown. Zuyun pursed his lips toward Wan Potion. Wan Potion laughed sarcastically and said to the Immortal Emperor, "Immortal Emperor, actually that's all, it's all in the past. Originally, your surname was not Wan, but Zuyun called you Lao Wan, so I guessed something. From now on, you will be Wan Immortal Friend." "Thank you, Immortal Emperor." Wan Potion immediately raised his hands and said. The Immortal Emperor also returned the gift and said, "The journey to immortality is not easy. Since you and I can work side by side, we might be able to go to the immortal world together in the future. In this world, we have only one goal, which is to ascend." Zuyun couldn't help but glance at the Immortal Emperor. No wonder he was the Immortal Emperor even though he was not strong in combat power. Although many immortal kings harbored evil intentions in Qingping Immortal Kingdom, it was considered stable. Be open-minded enough. Let's go. Zuyun put away the flying boat and led the two of them onto the teleportation array. This formation shouldn't use amethyst stone, right? The Immortal Emperor smiled and said something, but he couldn't help but look at the stone wall. Every plant, tree, monster, or stone can become an immortal. I don't have spiritual roots, so why can't I? He couldn't help but read it, thoughtfully. Wan Potion curled his lips and said, "Is this written by that guy Yayong?" Wan Potion and Yayong are both old enemies. Don't say this, he also recognizes the words in the notes. Exactly, Senior Yayong is a well-deserved peerless genius. Zuyun praised, and was about to channel the chaos power into the formation, when he saw the Immortal Emperor suddenly fly out. Immortal Emperor. Zuyun stopped quickly and followed him. Looking at the reaction of the Immortal Emperor, it seemed that he had discovered something extraordinary. Wan Potion had a strange look on his face, and seemed to have noticed something. He ran straight over and reached out to touch one of the engraved characters. When the finger was withdrawn, it was already stained with some purple dust. Amethyst stone. There is an amethyst stone here. The Immortal Emperor was extremely shocked, and Zuyun even exclaimed, "Is it the amethyst stone that inspired that formation?" "That's right," the Immortal Emperor suddenly raised his head and said to Zuyun, "This barren stone mountain, at least half of the mountain is made of amethyst." When the flying boat arrived, he looked down and saw the strange appearance of Barren Rock Mountain. At this moment, I suddenly guessed something. The amethyst stone, what is its magical use? Zuyun grew up on a barren rocky mountain. Although he didn't walk all over the barren half of the mountain, he often walked to the top cliff from a small path to play. He even picked up the day a glass mirror in a cave under the top cliff. Now, the Immortal Emperor said that half of the mountain is amethyst ore? I'm rich, I'm rich. The Immortal Emperor's reaction was okay, but Wan Potion's lips were trembling. Amethyst stone, is immortal crystal. What, immortal crystal? Zuyun's breathing also stagnated. Of course he knew what immortal crystal was. But why would there be immortal crystal in the lower world? Even in the mortal world? Yes, it's immortal crystal. That teleportation array is actually an immortal array, so I used immortal crystals to activate it, and the immortal crystals were all accumulated 100,000 years ago. Zuyun took a breath of cold air. It was no wonder that the immortal emperor wanted to get out so much, and the array master of the spiritual world could not break such an ordinary trap array for so many years. Just because those formation masters found the wrong direction at the beginning, he didn't want to waste more immortal crystals. I see, that's it? Zuyun said in a deep voice, don't move these immortal crystals for now. Before we ascend, we can take some with us in case of emergency. In addition, Zuyun considered more. There are still ordinary mortals living in Xianxia mountain, including the descendants of their Zhu family. If you want to collect immortal crystals, you must move those people out. This is undoubtedly a huge treasure house. It's also thanks to being in the mortal world. If it was in the spirit world, it might be discovered. That's right, the immortal emperor's eyes sparkled, he glanced at Wan Potion, and said, Zuyun, this immortal crystal, it's up to you to decide how to divide it. We'll talk about it later. Zuyun was not a stingy person. Wan Potion and the immortal emperor were both people worth making friends with. It was not impossible to divide the mountain into 3 parts at that time, but it was too early. Let's go first. Remember, this news must not be known to others. Understood. Wan Potion also came back to his senses and said, Zuyun boy, I owe you a favor too much. It's impossible to give up my life, so I can only practice well and ascend to the immortal realm as soon as possible, so that I can protect you when the time comes. Zuyun laughed dumbly. This time when he returned to the mortal world, he actually had such an unexpected gain. Let's go to Wanjian Mountain first, then we will go to Peepa Realm, and then to the Spirit Realm. Let's go. The 3 of them, full of vigor, stepped onto the teleportation array. A moment later, they appeared at the bottom of Wanjian Mountain. Damn it, where's my sword? Wan Potion didn't know that the Chaos Sword had been taken away by Zuyun. Seeing the empty space, he couldn't help cursing. Zuyun laughed and said, who can you blame for not taking good care of your own sword? Let's go. He took out the flying boat again, pulled Wan Potion and the immortal emperor up at the same time, and rushed to the Peepa realm. A few days later, they came to the ancestral land of the Lin family. Cross the holy lake and you will reach the spirit realm. After saying hello to Lin Xiaoqi, Zuyun personally pulled the 2 of them and jumped into the lake this time. When they appeared again, they were already in the sea outside the sky. Zuyun pulled them up to the sky and took out the flying boat again, but the immortal emperor frowned and said, Zuyun, there are monsters in this sea.